We leverage space capability in all of our joint operations. So whether it's ISR for targeting, whether it's PNT for navigation, whether it's SATCOM, we rely upon it all. All of our forces in our nations have been shaped with the understanding that space will be available.
Shaping the future of the Alliance, this is the Transformation Brief, and I'm your host, Jackie Faye Burton. For decades, NATO operated across three traditional domains: land, air, and maritime. Today, we operate in five. Cyberspace and space are now recognized as operational domains, but space is very much new terrain for the Alliance, and the threats there are evolving rapidly. Joining me today are two leaders within NATO to talk about it all: Colonel Nicolas Delbart, the head of the Space Branch here at Allied Command Transformation, and Major General Devin, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategy and Plans here, and the only U.S. Space Force officer at NATO. Welcome, gentlemen. But before we get started, I want to talk to you both about how you ended up working here. And Major General, let's begin with you. I don't think that many people know that you actually started off on the enlisted side of the house.
I did. So 1989, April 1989 is when I came in. I came in as an E1. So I was at the very, very bottom, and certainly had some different things going. I did my first assignment, my second assignment in the Air Force, in NATO, and then transitioned to DC. And that's when I got my commission in 96 and been doing space and missiles ever since. So about a 37-year career, 30 of it doing space and missiles.
Okay, well, you must be super, super proud. I don't know that many people that make it to Major General started off on the enlisted side. I think you're actually the first I've met in person. And Colonel Delbart, you actually started off as a pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a helicopter pilot flying a nap of the Earth, and now I am a working space issue, but I already knew that space was important. You know, my radio, my nav system was synced up on GPS. My mission preparation was on space-based imagery, etc. So here I am, making sure that what was a given to me when I was a helicopter pilot stays a given for NATO operations.
Okay, so you really never know where you're going to end up in life, but you might even end up in outer space. But for NATO, space wasn't exactly something that it has been planning for operationally either. Why now, let's start with you, Major General Pepper, is NATO looking so intrinsically at space?
Yeah, so of course we are executing, or we need to be an MDO-enabled alliance, multi-domain operations enabled alliance by 2030. 2019 is when NATO declared space as an operational domain. A little bit different than the U.S. The U.S. declared it as a warfighting domain because we have seen how Russia and China have actually put on orbit and terrestrial anti-satellite capability. So in order to conduct MDO, we have to synchronize activities in all five domains. That means land, air, sea, space, and cyberspace. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, and why is space so important operationally right now?
So all of our model is relying on the fact that space will be available. All of GPS-guided bombs, our GPS navigation, our SATCOM, etc. All the model is designed for that. And now that we see that our adversaries are starting to interfere with that, our operational superiority is potentially at risk. So we really need to step forward and deter and defend for space.
So when we're talking about space as an operational domain, what does this exactly mean for the Alliance? Are we talking about satellites? Are we talking about communications? Are we talking about surveillance? Major General Pepper, do you want to take that?
So going back to Nick's point, we leverage space capability in all of our joint operations. So whether it's ISR for targeting, whether it's PNT for navigation, whether it's SATCOM, we rely upon it all. All of our forces in our nations have been shaped with the understanding that space will be available. So as we learned from the Ukrainians in an event we just hosted a couple of weeks ago, we have to have space superiority in all domains to include space.
Okay, and speaking of other domains, what happens in space also has an impact on the other domains. How does the technology in space impact the traditional domains of air, land, and sea?
So exactly what General Pepper said. The commander needs to know: do I have enough SATCOM? Do I have enough ISR? Do I have the fog of war for a moment in the area to conduct my operations? So in the decision speed, in the decision that the commander makes, it needs to know that space is available, and if not, it needs to have mitigation measures for that. Very important to take that decision speed and also closing the kill chain. That's what space is bringing to the alliance now.
Okay, so go ahead.
And I'll give you an example of that, of what that looks like. So a couple of years ago, Admiral Paparo, before he became the Indo-PACOM commander, he was the maritime component commander. During one of the key Indo-PACOM exercises, space was off path, off plan. And he literally said, if space is off plan, then I'm off plan. I can't execute my missions. So again, as a maritime component commander, he understands the value and the importance of space and the need to achieve space superiority.
Okay, so space is no longer a support function.
Exactly.
It impacts every other domain. But what's really unique that you touched on earlier about space is that NATO doesn't own any space capabilities. It's really working with private industry. How does that change our approach here?
So working with private industry, of course, we do have a commercial integration plan or a commercial integration strategy, because certainly we see all these capable companies who are now providing capabilities that were once just dreams, right? We didn't have a lot of companies providing ISR capability like Maxar or Planet Labs doing monitoring of our threat systems, or Skylink providing SATCOM to the Ukrainians. So again, we rely upon a lot of commercial companies, and we expect them, if we contractually come into an agreement with them, to be available during crisis and conflict. So we have a very good relationship with our commercial providers, and I think, Nick, you can touch on this point, we're actually looking at standing up a commercial integration cell in the Space Operations Center in Germany, the NATO Space Operations Center in Germany. And this is going to be mirrored upon the U.S. Space commercial integration cell that they have in their Space Operations Center at Vandenberg.
Okay, do you want to add something there?
Absolutely, yeah. So as General Pepper said, a commercial sector is bringing capacity. Starlink is a good example. Thousands of satellites on orbit, that's unmatchable. And they're providing the speed of innovation. And now what NATO has to do, and that we are doing, is change the contracting. We need to be more agile to harness that, to bring in that commercial capabilities in the capability mix without creating too much dependencies.
Okay, and you kind of said not creating dependencies on the commercial world, but we are a little bit dependent. And I think in the past, the militaries have been adverse to working with the civilian sector because they were worried about vulnerabilities. What are we doing to mitigate any vulnerabilities here?
Yeah, so the vulnerabilities, I go back to NATO standards. So any commercial company that's providing support to NATO has to deliver their capability using NATO standards. And I think that's where our standards have really become universal. For any nation to deliver capability, they have to deliver it to NATO standards. That includes the cyber protection, the link protection that goes along with providing that service.
Okay, and then also industry typically moves a lot faster than governments.
Right.
So how are we keeping up here?
So the goal is to have a two-way stream exchange so that we can, ahead of the program, ahead of the operational requirement, exchange with the industry, hey, this is what we are thinking, and in the other way, they can tell us, hey, this is where we are investing, etc., to make sure everything is aligned. So that we have a head start of contracting. And then we need that agile model to be able to very quickly take the operational requirement and bring it into operation through integration on the ops floor at the heart of our operations very quickly.
Okay, and when we are talking about nations, what are we now asking from nations to do so that we can address the space domain?
So the first thing we've done in the NATO defense planning process is we've sent a survey out to all the nations, and you could probably talk more about this, to ask the nations to tell us what you have available or you're willing to make available to NATO. Because right now it's all voluntary. We don't have any quantitative capability targets that we can assign to the nations. We're in a process of developing some quantitative targets, but we still have to get them accepted by the nation. The nation has to be willing to be tasked to deliver a certain level of ISR, a certain level of SATCOM. So that's the first thing. We have to change our NATO defense planning process, and then we have to get the nation's agreement to provide that to us, to be tasked to provide that through the NDPP and not on a voluntary basis.
Okay, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, sure. So the idea is to collectively get to that awareness, because we discussed about threats earlier. you need to be able to identify those threats, to characterize them, and then build in that redundancy, resiliency that we talked about with the commercial sector, and then act upon it collectively. So we also need to have the allies help us act on the threats to make sure that all the services and operational support remains available.
Okay, and wrapping it up, what happens if we fail here?
Oh boy. So if we fail, that means governments collapse. If you look at, I'll just use GPS as an example. People don't realize that our entire banking system relies upon the timing signal that comes off of those satellites. It's not just the position information, it's the timing. So this allows you to put your credit card into an ATM machine and pull money out of your bank. This allows you to go to the gas station and pump gas by sliding your credit card in. This allows your phone, your smartphone to operate. It's that timing signal. If we lose that timing signal, then everything goes down. We're going back to 1970s type of technology. So again, and all of our Wall Street, every banking system relies upon that timing signal. So again, we have got to make sure that we always have space superiority because our way of life depends on it.
Exactly. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Space may be newer to NATO's operational framework, but it underpins every other domain. From deterrence to defense to command and control, the alliance's ability to operate depends on access to and resilience in space. That's all for this episode of the Transformation Brief. Thanks for listening.